Let me tell you something quietly true about the people who live inside heavy bodies. We often see the weight before we see the person. We measure before we understand. We assume their story begins and ends with food, but it rarely ever does. Because behind every number on a scale lies something much deeper: emotion, history, and psychology. See, weight isn't just physical. It's emotional architecture built over years. It's protection, sometimes comfort, sometimes punishment. Some people eat not because they're hungry, but because they're hurting. Others eat because it's the only moment they feel safe, the only instant the world pauses its judgment. And yet, from the outside, we call it lack of control, as if discipline were the only language the body understands. But here's the truth. Every extra pound often carries a story of stress, trauma, rejection, or survival. Psychologists call it emotional eating, but it's more than that. It's the body's way of whispering what the mind cannot say out loud. In a world obsessed with perfection, where filters define worth, food becomes one of the last honest pleasures left, something you can taste, feel, and hold when everything else feels uncertain. And yet, there's guilt. It's easy to mock what we don't understand, but the psychology of weight is not about weakness, it's about coping. It's about the quiet ways people learn to survive their own emotions. Because sometimes, what looks like indulgence is actually pain wearing a disguise. When psychologists study eating behavior, they rarely start with food. They start with feeling, because behind every craving, there's an emotion trying to breathe. Behind every binge, there's a silence trying to be filled. And sometimes, the heaviest thing a person carries isn't their body, it's their mind. Emotional weight begins quietly. It starts the first time comfort is found in a small act of sweetness, a cookie after a hard day, a meal that numbs the noise. For many, food becomes a soft language of relief. It doesn't judge, it doesn't abandon, and it doesn't ask questions. It simply fills. And over time, that filling becomes familiar, even sacred. Because when the world feels unpredictable, food feels consistent. When people leave, food stays. Psychologists call this associative conditioning, when the brain links eating with emotional safety. The more you repeat it, the stronger the bond. So it's not about greed or lack of discipline. It's about comfort wired into survival. Some people overeat the way others overthink. Both are attempts to quiet the noise inside. But the world doesn't see that. The world sees a body and assumes a story. Lazy, unmotivated, undisciplined. Yet in truth, many who struggle with weight are among the most emotionally sensitive people you'll ever meet. They feel deeply, absorb quietly, and often blame themselves long before anyone else ever could. Their relationship with food isn't just consumption, it's conversation. It's the body's way of answering back when the heart feels unheard. For some, it starts with stress. The body releases cortisol, the stress hormone that heightens hunger. The brain, searching for relief, craves sugar and fat, instant comfort, quick reward. For others, it's loneliness. Studies show that people who feel socially isolated often eat more, not because they're hungry, but because the act of eating mimics connection. It triggers oxytocin, the same chemical released when you feel loved. So in a way, food becomes a stand-in for affection, a substitute hug when no one's around. And then there's childhood. So many relationships with food are born in early years, quietly shaped by environment. Maybe food was a reward. You did well, have a treat. Maybe it was comfort after pain. Don't cry. Eat this. Over time, the mind learns. Food equals love. So when adulthood arrives with all its loneliness and noise, the inner child still reaches for that same comfort, not because it's logical, but because it's familiar. The spoon becomes a bridge to a memory where things felt okay. But here's the paradox. The same act that offered comfort becomes a cycle of guilt. I shouldn't have eaten that. I'll start again tomorrow. And each promise broken deepens the wound. Because the real hunger isn't for food, it's for control. And control is the first thing that shame takes away. The human brain is wired to seek balance. When emotions spike, we look for anchors. Food is the most accessible anchor. It's everywhere, legal and socially acceptable. But the more we rely on it to regulate emotions, the less we trust ourselves to feel without it. So slowly the emotional vocabulary narrows. Sadness becomes eating. Stress becomes eating. Even boredom becomes eating. Until the person forgets what true hunger feels like, both physical and emotional. Psychologists call this alexithymia, the inability to name one's feelings. Many who struggle with chronic weight gain aren't overeating as much as they're underfeeling. They've spent so long using food to mute their emotions that they've forgotten how to sit with them. And it's not weakness, it's a trauma response. It's the body's way of saying, if I can't control my world, at least I can control my comfort. Because society loves the idea of self-love, but rarely practices it toward people who don't fit the visual ideal. A person living in a larger body becomes a walking contradiction, told to love yourself by the same culture that constantly reminds them not to. Every mirror, every glance, every comment becomes a quiet battle between wanting to be accepted and wanting to disappear. This is where the cycle deepens the psychological feedback loop. Shame leads to stress, stress leads to eating. Eating leads to guilt. Guilt leads back to shame. And round it goes until the person no longer eats for hunger, but to escape the pain of being misunderstood. That's not gluttony, that's self-soothing. When someone says, "Why don't they just lose weight?" what they're really saying is, why can't they fix years of emotional conditioning in a few weeks? But human behavior doesn't change through shame. It changes through understanding. The psychology of weight isn't about vanity, it's about vulnerability. It's about people who've carried emotions too heavy to name and bodies that learn to bear the load. They aren't weak, they're human. And sometimes, being human means carrying more than what the world can see. If the first weight a person carries is emotional, the second one is social. Because we don't live in a vacuum, we live in mirrors. Reflections built by culture, expectation, and comparison. And for those who struggle with weight, the mirror often becomes a battlefield. Not the glass one in their room, but the invisible one held up by the world every single day. From childhood, we learn what beauty is supposed to look like. Magazines, movies, and social media whisper the same message. Thin is desirable. Thin is success. Thin is discipline. And anything that falls outside that ideal becomes a quiet target of judgment, not always spoken, but always felt. The psychology behind this is known as social comparison theory. It explains how we measure our worth through the lens of others. We look at images, at bodies, at filtered perfection, and we start to evaluate our own reflection against them. The result? A deep and silent erosion of self-esteem. For someone living in a larger body, that comparison is relentless. Every advertisement, every casual comment, every harmless joke reinforces the idea that visibility requires thinness. Over time, this message embeds itself in the subconscious. If I lose weight, I'll finally be enough. But the mind doesn't work like that. Because when self-worth is built on conditions, peace never arrives. Psychologists call this conditional self-esteem. It's when your value depends on meeting external standards, body shape, achievement, and approval. You may change the body, but the voice of inadequacy remains. It's not the mirror that traps you, it's the meaning you've attached to it. And yet, the world rarely sees the inner conflict. They see the body, not the belief. They comment on appearance but ignore the psychology beneath it. The truth is, body image isn't just about how you look, it's about how you feel. Seen. When people stare, laugh, or make assumptions, they send invisible messages that shape identity. You're too much. You don't belong. You're not disciplined enough. These aren't just words, they become emotional weight. Over time, they can lead to internalized stigma, where a person starts to believe the world's judgment about themselves. This stigma doesn't just live in the mind, it rewires the body. Studies show that social rejection and shame trigger the same pain centers in the brain as physical injury. So when someone mocks another person's body, they're not just teasing, they're causing neurological harm. The body remembers humiliation as vividly as trauma. And that's why change built on shame never lasts. Because shame doesn't motivate, it paralyzes. It convinces people that they're not worthy of being better. So they stop trying, not because they don't care, but because they've stopped believing they deserve to care. Ironically, this same society that shames unhealthy bodies also glorifies extremes. It praises starvation as discipline and obsession as dedication. It sells diet culture wrapped in self-love quotes. It tells people to accept themselves right after selling them a product that says they shouldn't. This contradiction is psychological chaos. For people living within it, the mind becomes a pendulum swinging between guilt and rebellion. One day, I'm going to change my life. The next, why bother? I'll never fit in anyway. That's not inconsistency, it's emotional exhaustion. It's the toll of living in a world that demands transformation but offers no compassion for the process. And then there's the role of social media, the new mirror. A place where bodies become brands and validation comes in likes, where filters blur the line between real and ideal, and where someone's worth can rise or fall based on a number. In that world, authenticity feels risky, vulnerability feels unsafe. So people hide. They post less, smile less, speak less until silence becomes their only protection. Psychologists describe this as self-presentation anxiety, the fear of being seen and judged. For many who struggle with weight, even posting a photo feels like exposure. They imagine the comments before they appear. They preempt the laughter. So they shrink in visibility long before they ever shrink in size. And slowly, invisibility becomes identity. But here's the paradox. Many of these individuals are some of the most empathetic, emotionally intelligent, and resilient people you'll meet. Because when you've lived in a body the world critiques, you develop a deeper understanding of pain, not just your own, but others too. You learn compassion by necessity. You notice who looks without judgment and who doesn't. You understand silence because you've lived inside it. And that depth, that quiet awareness often becomes strength. It's what psychologists call post-traumatic growth, the ability to transform pain into empathy, rejection into insight. People who've been shamed often become the safest spaces for others because they know how it feels to be unseen. Still, the road to self-acceptance isn't easy. It requires unlearning years of conditioning. It means redefining beauty as something internal, not external. It means recognizing that your worth isn't measured in pounds, but in presence in how you show up for yourself, even when the world refuses to. Because when society teaches you to hate your body, loving it becomes an act of rebellion. And when the world tells you that your value depends on size, peace comes from refusing to play that game at all. So, the psychology of weight isn't just about food or fitness, it's about identity. It's about how a person's sense of self is shaped, scarred, and sometimes saved by the way they're seen. And until we change how we see, we'll never truly understand what it means to carry weight, not on the body, but in the soul. Healing doesn't start with a diet. It starts with awareness. Because before the body can change, the mind has to be heard truly, deeply, and without judgment. For most people who struggle with weight, the real challenge isn't food, it's forgiveness. Forgiving the body for carrying what the heart couldn't. Forgiving the years spent hiding. Forgiving yourself for using food as comfort, when comfort was the only thing that kept you alive. You see, healing is never about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before shame taught you to hide. Before you started believing that love had a size. Psychologists describe a concept called self-compassion. It's not the same as self-esteem. It doesn't depend on success or beauty. It's the simple act of being kind to yourself, even when you feel undeserving. It's the inner voice that says, you are still worthy, even when you're struggling. That voice is the antidote to shame, because where shame isolates, compassion reconnects. Where shame says, you're broken, compassion whispers, you're healing. When people try to change from a place of hatred, punishing themselves with diets, guilt, and comparison, the change doesn't last. Because you can't hate yourself into becoming someone you love. Real transformation starts when you stop waging war on your body and start listening to what it's been trying to tell you. Your body is not your enemy. It's your oldest friend. It has carried you through sleepless nights, heartbreak, rejection, and every silent war you fought with yourself. The stretch marks, the scars, the softness, they are not flaws. They are survival marks. Proof that you kept living, even when you didn't feel like it. When you understand that, you stop chasing perfection and start choosing peace. Peace doesn't mean giving up. It means shifting the motive from punishment to nourishment. You stop asking, How can I change this body? And start asking, how can I care for it? That's where psychology meets healing. There's a principle in cognitive therapy called reframing, changing the story you tell yourself. Instead of saying, I'm fat and unworthy, you learn to say, I've used food to cope, and that's okay, but I'm ready to find new ways to heal. That single shift from shame to understanding rewires the brain. It changes your emotional chemistry. It gives power back to choice. And the beautiful thing about healing is that it doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't need a grand transformation, a viral before and after photo, or public validation. Sometimes it's just you making a quiet promise that you won't speak to yourself like an enemy anymore. Slowly, the mind begins to trust again. You start eating not to escape, but to nourish. You start moving not to punish, but to feel alive. You start resting not out of laziness, but love. That's when true balance begins, when health becomes an act of gratitude, not guilt. But the world will still try to pull you back into comparison. There will still be comments, mirrors, and moments that sting. Healing doesn't erase pain. It builds resilience against it. Because you can't control what others see, only how you see yourself. Psychologists call this internal locus of control, the belief that your worth is determined from within, not by others' opinions. People who develop this mindset experience higher happiness, better emotional regulation, and greater confidence. They stop performing for approval and start living for peace. That's the ultimate freedom, not thinness, not aesthetics, peace. Peace with your reflection, peace with your habits, peace with your past. Because the real goal was never to become smaller, it was to become whole. And here's the truth few people say out loud. Sometimes, people who've carried emotional weight all their lives become the strongest healers for others. They've lived through pain, and that pain gave them perspective. They understand what empathy feels like when the world turns cold. Their softness becomes their power. So maybe, just maybe, your journey with weight was never about losing, it was about learning. Learning where the hurt came from. Learning how to soothe it differently. Learning that your value was never meant to be measured. Because when you heal the relationship with yourself, everything else begins to align: the habits, the energy, even the body. But it starts inside, with compassion, with understanding, with the courage to say, I deserve to feel good, not because I'm perfect, but because I'm human. The psychology of people who struggle with weight isn't a story of weakness, it's a story of survival. It's the stories of people who felt too deeply, hurt too long, and are now learning to turn that hurt into healing. And if you're one of them, you are not broken. You are becoming, and one day, when you look back, you'll realize the weight you carried wasn't just on your body, it was your story, and you turned it into strength.